Nearly 3 years after the release of Justice League, the little pipe dream that could, known as Release the Snyder Cut, was finally confirmed. And yes, I may have wet my pants this morning when I found out. This is the Classic Podcast. All right, welcome to the Classic Podcast, movie views, news, and reviews from people just like you. I'm your host, Hayden Roper. All right, so today we are talking about the Snyder Cut, the fabled Zack Snyder cut of Justice League. Now, so some backstory here. Back when this movie was in development, about 4 years ago, it was released in 2017, Zack Snyder had been tasked with the job of creating this DC cinematic universe, all the DC Comics properties, characters, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, all those. So prior to Zack Snyder's work on the DC Extended Universe, DCEU, as the fandom calls it, he had such works under his belt like 300 and Watchmen. Now, both very interesting films. I personally was a fan of them. I'm a Zack Snyder fan. He's a relatively divisive filmmaker. He's been criticized for style over substance. But that's not the issue we're going to be talking about today. Today, we are focusing on his role in the DC Universe and more importantly, what the Snyder Cut means, what it is, what it isn't, and what it could mean going forward. So Zack Snyder started off in the DC Extended Universe directing Man of Steel. So the Superman reboot with Henry Cavill made Superman this gritty, realistic, modern figure. Because the previous Superman outings, Superman Returns of Christopher Reeves, those were a little dated by this point. So that was back in 2013, I believe. So we had this gritty take, and so it was a mixed success. It got about a 58-60% somewhere on Rotten Tomatoes, and it made about $700 million on like a $250 million budget. So it was a mixed bag. So that wasn't great to kick off your universe. At this point, Marvel had already released the Avengers, so they had already got a billion-dollar franchise under their belt. So Warner Brothers and DC were trying to catch up, and this kind of led to a lot of mistakes along the way. But anyway, so we got Man of Steel. I personally was a huge fan of the movie. There was legitimate complaints about the portrayal of Superman and the darkness of the story. But anyway, that was Zack Snyder's vision, and we had that. Whatever. He then got signed off to do Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice. Now, this was an even more divisive film. It brought in all sorts of money, close to $900 million. However, when the movie was tasked with bringing together Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman in one movie, a movie that didn't make $1 billion was kind of unacceptable. And so this was seen with very, very mixed reviews. The critics hated it. They gave it like a 20% on Rotten Tomatoes, something incredibly low. The fans were kind of like with Man of Steel. They were kind of mixed. There was about a 50, 60, 40% fan approval rating. So still, for like the three biggest names in all of comic books to unite together and get that kind of result, yeah, it's not great. So naturally, Warner Brothers was upset, and they were kind of scrambling for what to do next. So the problem with that is by the time this was released, Justice League was already underway with Zack Snyder at the helm, in control of everything. Warner Brothers was like, Zack Snyder, make us our universe. You have full vision, everything. So right about this point, when Batman v Superman gets released, and it gets not great reviews. It's still making a lot of money, just not nearly as much as they liked, and the reviews were honestly pretty bad for what it should have been. So they kind of freaked out, because also right around the corner, Suicide Squad was released, and that movie was just hot garbage. Granted, not directed by Zack Snyder, but that movie was just hot garbage all around. Everyone pretty much agrees on that. And it's getting rebooted soon. I don't know why they're still doing that when they have so many other great properties they can do. But they're rebooting Suicide Squad soon with Guardians of the Galaxy director James Gunn. And I'm excited for that. I think he'll do a good job. So anyway, Zack Snyder is now making progress in Justice League to these mixed reviews. So actually two flops, more or less, back-to-back. Batman v Superman and Suicide Squad. Suicide Squad was a flop all around. Batman v Superman was just not the success they wanted. So the development on Justice League is underway, and this is Warner Brothers looking at it like this is their flagship franchise. Justice League, the biggest heroes in all of comic books coming together. This has to be a $1 billion outing for us. Otherwise, we're in serious trouble. So they decided to do what never benefits anybody is get directly involved as a studio. In movie production, when the studio gets involved, it almost never yields positive results because it's a bunch of corporate executives wanting to make sure they make money when they don't actually know that much about how to make good films and specifically how to make cohesive films. Because as soon as a director creates a vision for a film and then someone else comes in and is like, you know what, but like, can it be funnier? Because we would really like it if people laughed in this movie. And the director's like, well, that's not at all what I planned. Like, well, we're paying for the movie, so make it lighter. And that's where a lot of films really get derailed. So tragedy struck for Zack Snyder and his family shortly before the release of Justice League. When I say shortly, we're talking in filmmakers' perspective, so it was a couple months. And ultimately, with a movie this big in scope and in budget, that is a very short time period. So Zack Snyder's daughter committed suicide a couple months before the movie's release. And here's where some of the controversy started. Did Warner Brothers kind of use this as an excuse to phase him out of development to come in for a different director who would have a vision closer to what they wanted? He did step aside. It is still a little up in the air as to whether or not that was fully on his own or if they kind of forced him out of it. Who's to say? But anyway, before he left, he released a Snyder Cut, is what it will come to be known. He showed it to the studios. These are very rough cuts of movies that just kind of have a lot of unfinished CGI, mostly just scenes spliced together to give you a general feel of like, hey, roughly, this is what the movie's going to look like. This is what our story's going to look like. What do y'all think? So he screened that for executives. I want to say it was about 2.5 hours long at this point, because he originally shot about 5 hours worth of movie, which was condensed then to about 4 hours of what he actually wanted. But the studio at this point wanted a 2-hour flat movie to maximize profits at the box office. So he gave him about a 2.5 hour cut as he was leaving, be like, this is where the project stands. And then he was gone. So then Warner Brothers decides to copy Marvel. So how do you copy Marvel best? Well, you do literally exactly what they did and hire the director of the first 2 Avengers movies, Joss Whedon. Now, Joss Whedon has a very particular directing style, very lighthearted, quippy. You know what those first 2 Avengers movies are like. Now, that's not bad. He's a good director. However, Warner Brothers essentially forced him to turn this already shot movie into the Avengers. Now, this is very hard to do, especially on such a short notice. So they had extensive reshoots, and they didn't have a lot of time to fix things. So a lot of the movie you saw, in the end, Zack Snyder tweeted out something about how you saw about 25% of what his movie was. The rest was Joss Whedon. So the problem with these reshoots was, if you've ever heard of Mustache Gate, this was it. Henry Cavill, his acting career beefing up at the time, he was in Mission Impossible Fallout. He was the spy with the mustache. Basically, he was contractually obligated to keep that during this period of reshoots because he was still working on Mission Impossible Fallout. Now, this was a problem because, 1, Superman doesn't have a mustache, and 2, they were very limited on time to get this movie reshot and into theaters because it's still scheduled for its same release date and it's a couple months out. So this didn't leave him with a lot of options. So this is where they digitally took away his mustache, which became a huge controversy and honestly became frankly obnoxious. It's obvious and it's weird, and there's this uncanny valley on his lips, and you can't look at him the same way and really just feel like, yeah, that, like, something's off about Superman. And Superman, Justice League, Superman's probably the heart of your story. He's probably a big piece. And actually, Superman's parts were almost completely reshot with Joss Whedon, meaning Henry Cavill had to essentially scrap everything he already did for Justice League and refilm with his mustache, which they then had to digitally remove. So in the end, all this resulted in a Justice League movie that pretty much flopped. I can personally say it was a huge disappointment. I was pumped for this movie. And then it got relatively mixed reviews, again, like 40% or something. Not great at all. But it was what I would consider a fun but poorly put together comic book movie, which this movie had to be something spectacular, and it was something incredibly mediocre. Now, I'm not saying this movie was total garbage. It wasn't quite on the level of Suicide Squad, which was just pure garbage. But this wasn't a ton better. It's a very mediocre movie, a lot of glaring issues. The villain looked terrible. The plot was really rushed. The tone was all over the place. The characters weren't really themselves. But anyway, walking into the theater the first time, I still kind of enjoyed it. I was disappointed for sure, but I still thought, you know what? I got to see my heroes on the big screen. That's something. So it ended up being a huge box office flop because this thing had something like a $250 million budget. It made around $700 million, which for a movie that had to make over $1 billion, hugely short. I think they ended up taking about a $50 million loss on it, something like that. Not great at all. So they were put into complete panic, and they said, you know what? Screw this extended universe. We're pretty much shutting it down. We need something fast to save us. Otherwise, this whole franchise could go under. Thankfully, The likes of Wonder Woman and Aquaman and Shazam nailed it at the box office, and that's the reason they're even still making DC movies, really, without taking an extensive break from them. So what do you do when you're a fan of comic books and you're angry? You go troll on the internet. Not really. So there got a lot of criticisms for the fan base here as being toxic because there was a lot of toxicity to the hate that was released online. Not to say that it wasn't all justified, considering the movie was a huge disappointment, but this got it labeled kind of as a toxic fan base. But whatever. There were plenty of people who were not a part of this. So what do you do when a movie sucks? You blame the studio and cross your fingers hoping the director has a better cut hidden somewhere. Well, for about 2 years, this was just totally the thing of myth. Everyone kind of suspected that there might be a Snyder Cut. Zack Snyder was saying things, but again, directors always say things when their movies tank, and they're like, oh, I have a better version. The studios didn't let me release it. So anyway, a lot of people were skeptical. There was like a little bit of evidence here and there. It's like, oh yeah, this cut of the movie exists. So anyway, from there, Zack Snyder started teasing this thing like crazy. So whether or not it actually existed was up in the air. By exist, I mean, of course, somewhere there was that filmed footage. There was a storyboard they put together. Yes, that cut of the movie always has for sure existed. Now, that is far from a finished product. You need reshoots for any movie. You have to have your score. You have to have the visual effects. All that very time-consuming, very expensive. There's lots of stuff that gets filmed for movies that never sees the light of day and is nowhere near a finished product. And that's what we kind of assumed it was, whereas if he were to finish it, it was going to be extensive. There's really no way. Why would the studio do that? They're just going to cut their loss on this movie and move forward. Well, we're in the age of digital streaming. HBO Max is the answer to Disney+. Disney+ is huge right now. It's got The Mandalorian on it. It's got all Marvel, Star Wars, National Geographic, anime, Disney movies. Great service, great content for sure. Now, Warner Brothers has to step up because Disney is slowly taking control of the entire entertainment industry. They have to catch up. They come up with HBO Max, consolidate all their properties. So what's the best way to market something? Naturally, you get the internet in a frenzy. And there's no quicker way to get the internet in a frenzy than by feeding them something that they've been asking for 3 years. When I say this is not just a small portion of just nerds in their basement fighting for this. On the 2-year anniversary of the film, there was a billboard up in Times Square about release the Snyder Cut. People were blasting ads. It got trending on social media. The stars of the movie supported this release the Snyder Cut movement. Zack Snyder's been pushing it for years. This was a relatively big thing for the entertainment industry, which I personally think is really cool that you actually got enough people to care about a comic book movie. When really, I thought the world was full of grown-ups who like grown-up things, and here they are starting ad campaigns for a mythical cut of a movie that we'll probably never see. So anyway, on May 20th, Zack Snyder held a screening of Man of Steel to help benefit people affected by COVID, something like that. I don't remember the details of the stream. I don't know how watching a movie about Superman helps people, but sure, why not? Fun excuse to watch a movie and talk about comics. There have been heavy speculation for a while now based on recent things he's been tweeting out, based on things the stars have been saying, based on little hints here and there, and a hashtag that was released with the watch party invitation that made people suspect, like, hang on, I think we're getting an announcement. There's always speculation. Every time literally anything happens, people are like, oh my God, we're going to get new Snyder Cut news, which for the longest time has just been just totally hopeful nonsense. Word broke today that the Snyder Cut is happening and everyone lost their minds, and I was one of them. Because this thing was the thing of legend. This was never going to happen. Why would a studio pay to finish this movie that's going to cost them $30, $40 million that probably will never hit theaters? They would never do it. Zack Snyder himself said, I think it might be in a documentary one day about this leaked footage that I kind of have a little bit of screenshots and stuff of, and it will never really come to anything more than that. People just talk about it, speculate, and have fun with it. He confirmed HBO Max, the Warner Brothers owned entertainment streaming system, is going to fund this Zack Snyder cut of Justice League, which is awesome. Anyway, it's estimated that $20 to $30 million will be needed to fully finish this cut with visual effects and small-scale reshoots. Now, there's a lot of speculation as to what exactly they'll be able to reshoot due to COVID and actor schedules and all sorts of factors. Because, for example, right now, Ben Affleck is never coming back as Batman. He's hung up the cape and cowl. He's done. So most likely you're getting no Batman reshoots. We could be wrong, but that's what's expected right now. However, you have a lot of other big actors who are still super pumped about their roles and would love to help see this project through. Henry Cavill, Gal Gadot, Jason Momoa, Ezra Miller, Ray Fisher. Ezra Miller just had a scandal about him beating up a girl or something like that. I don't know the details. I haven't looked up into it, but he's in hot water of public opinion right now, so who knows if he'll actually be able to come back and reshoot stuff as the Flash. But anyway, Ray Fisher was like one of the most excited actors I've ever seen to get his role of Cyborg. And honestly, I'm excited to see him actually play a character, because in the actual cut of Justice League we saw, he was a 95% animated creature. We had a little half a face. He had nothing. He was just a MacGuffin the whole time. Honestly, a huge waste of the character. Great character. I'm excited to see what they do with him. He's supposedly the heart of the news story of this Snyder Cut, and I'm super excited to see that. So here's some realistic expectations we can see from the Snyder Cut. Now, right now, it's currently rumored. There's a lot of speculation still. Not a lot of stuff is confirmed, but the current consensus is that there will be a roughly 4-hour cut of the movie, the cut Zack Snyder originally wanted to release before he cut it down to 2.5 hours. And this will either be released as a 6-episode mini-series of Zack Snyder's Justice League, or it might just be a one big hey, here you go, 4-hour supercut of your Justice League. So starting off, I'm assuming you have seen the Justice League movie. Otherwise, from here on out, the stuff I talk about probably is not going to make any sense. The score has already been finished by Junkie XL. Now, he did the original score, and then Danny Elfman came in when Joss Whedon came in to redo the score, because scores are very particular to the actual scenes you have. So naturally, when you reshoot somewhere 40% of the movie like Joss Whedon did, you're going to need your composer to do a ton of rework. But thankfully, Zack Snyder's score is complete based on their original plan. So that saves a lot of time and money right there. So now let's go to the changes, what we can actually expect from the movie itself. Now, we got a lot of exciting stuff here. So starting off, Steppenwolf. God. So I think a lot of the reason he looked so bad was because they rushed his production, because he replaced a lot of Darkseid cameos, who's the big bad of the Justice League universe. He's the Thanos of the Justice League universe, if you didn't know. And so Steppenwolf is his general, and he was the only villain we saw, and he frankly looked like an elderly person's butt cheeks. His face was wrinkly. His armor was poorly designed. He looked like he was 10 years behind his time in terms of technology. Unacceptable for a movie with this budget. In the original Justice League movie, the theatrical cut, there was this invasion of Earth scene where they talk about Steppenwolf, the conqueror of worlds, as Wonder Woman said, where all the tribes of man and the old gods, meaning the gods you know from Greek mythology, Ares, Hades, Zeus, that sort of thing, they all band together with the Green Lantern on Earth at the time, and all the tribes of man who, frankly, looked worthless. They were still using, swords at this point. Don't know how they're going to stand up to the forces of Apocalypse, but whatever. And the Atlanteans and the Amazonians, all of them came together, met forces. And so in this new cut, the invasion of Earth in the past is way longer, and we see more, special shots of characters at land, King of Atlantis, Yelin-Gur, the Green Lantern, the old gods, like I said, Ares, Zeus, Apollo, whoever they decide to include. And so in this, instead of it being Steppenwolf, it's actually Darkseid who comes in himself. Anyway, Zack Snyder posted a picture quite a while ago about what that sketch looked like. So that will be expected in the new movie. So in general, Darkseid's role is he's more important to the motivation of Steppenwolf. In the theatrical cut, Steppenwolf had these mother boxes that he was trying to merge to create the unity, to transform Earth into Apocalypse. They kept calling them mother, which just didn't seem to make sense because they were mother boxes. Not you wouldn't just say mother because that's weird, but he was, and that was not explained. That'll be explained in this cut. At the end of the movie, the Justice League all meets up, Superman's back, and they are fighting Steppenwolf, and what they do is Wonder Woman breaks his sword with her sword somehow. The parademons are upset at Steppenwolf because they can sense his fear. All the fear and parademon stuff was all added by Joss Whedon. It was kind of a strange addition, that entire initial scene with Batman on the rooftop and the Thug, which felt partially serious, partially silly, because the Thug comes hopping over when Batman's tracking a thing. You can tell that's supposed to be a comedy angle, but at the same time the scene's not really comedic because it's Batman. Anyway, that whole thing about fear and the parademons blowing up when they hear sirens or whatever that was all Joss Whedon. So anyway, at the end, she breaks Steppenwolf's sword, and the parademons sense his fear, and they all come and attack him and take him up through the boom tube, and he's gone. Movie's pretty much over. Now that's going to change. What's going to happen is they're going to kill Steppenwolf. I believe Aquaman like impales him, and then Wonder Woman's going to chop his head off, something really cool. And then his head's essentially going to roll over to a boom tube, which is how these evil people, the people from Apocalypse, is how they transport like across space in a matter of seconds. Think Thanos' Space Stone, those portals. These are boom tubes. On the other side of that boom tube, you're going to see Darkseid, who's going to be the main villain of upcoming movies if they actually, by some magic, make some more. He'll be sitting there seeing his decapitated general and looking at the League, and then the portal will close, and that'll more or less be the end of the movie. So that's the primary change to Steppenwolf. Now let's get into Cyborg, who, as Zack Snyder said, is the heart of the Justice League movie, considering in the theatrical cut, he didn't do anything. God, he was so disappointing in the theatrical cut. I have high hopes for him here. So Cyborg's origin story, in the sake of this film, is pretty consistent with some of the newer comics. He's a football hotshot. He's going off. In this film, I believe he's actually at college already, but he's got a scholarship. He's a superstar football player. So Cyborg has a terrible relationship with his dad, Silas, who works at Star Labs, who's all in the know with parademons, Mother Box, all stuff. That's his stuff. So he's very absent in Victor's life, and this is obviously a problem for him. So he's talking with his mom in the car about how angry he is about his absent father, and then he gets angry during the conversation, and like typical Cyborg, he does something that accidentally, it ends up killing his mom and badly injuring him. Now, this is part of the tragedy of Cyborg, and in saving him, his dad merges him with a Mother Box, and that's how he gets his powers. That's how he's linked to the Mother Boxes, to Apocalypse, to Darkseid. That's how he fits in the story. So anyway, this was actually seen in that cameo scene in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, where Bruce sends Diana the files of the members from the League or something, and she sees Cyborg on a bed, and his dad's the Mother Box embraces him. Hopefully we get more of how he's like that happen, because people probably forget about that. So we're going to see maybe some scenes of Victor hiding a Mother Box from Parademon and discovering he has this arm cannon he can use to fire. Also, he's going to go on the roof of his building and like figure out how to fly. He kind of has a little face mask thing. It looks like Iron Man that you saw in one of the old Comic-Con trailers. So he's still kind of a MacGuffin. He's the only one linked to these creatures. He's going to tell the Justice League about what parademons are, about Mother Box, about Apocalypse. He's going to learn his abilities, typical origin hero stuff. This movie focuses a lot more on Flash, Aquaman, and Cyborg, because prior to this point, you may not know who those characters are. You know, if you're in the know, of course you know them, but if you're just a casual film goer, there's never been a Cyborg movie or Flash movie. I hope to God there was an Aquaman movie, because before they recently made it, that would have been a disaster. The plot goes on, and the unity of the three Mother Boxes still happens. That's better explained. So actually, a rewrite of Steppenwolf's character from the comics is his mother. I think it's usually his sister in the comics is like trapped in the spirit of those boxes. I'm a little confused on exactly. Maybe he's trying to release her. I don't know. But that's why they're called Mother Boxes in the sake of this continuity. In that final battle, when they're trying to do the unity, Cyborg's going to have some visions. One is going to be with Darkseid. Another is going to be the Nightmare timeline, which if you're familiar with Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, that's when Batman has that vision on his desk where he's walking through that like desert wasteland. There's the big Omega symbol on the ground. That's Darkseid's symbol. And then this evil Superman comes and kills him. And then he wakes up and the Flash is like time traveling, saying like Lois is the key or whatever. That's the timeline Cyborg gets a glimpse of. So now let's go to Batman. What's going to change about his story? So his search for Aquaman Arthur Curry was cut down to literally just the scene where he finds him in the theatrical cut. He goes to the Icelandic village, confronts him, and pisses him off. So we'll get to see more of a detective film with Batman of him trying to figure out who Aquaman is, as well as him investigating parademons, and that scene with him on the rooftop and the robber saying like, oh, you know, what's that? And he goes, and Batman's like, making the Sin Sphere. That'll hopefully be cut. That was all Joss Whedon. That was not originally part of the thing at all. It was also said that Batman will be much more heavily involved in the action sequences, because if you notice, he's always the problem with Batman in these stories. He's a regular human. He can't stack up with the same power of all these other characters. So, I mean, in Justice League, he literally had a gun, you know, Batman with his gun. He was shooting parademons, and that's like most of the action he had. Or he was driving around in his tank or something like that. So Batman's an incredible fighter. It's seriously criminal to put him in a starring role in the movie, and he does very little of the fighting that he's so good at. Anyway, that's expected to be a big part of Batman. He's more involved in the action. He gets to do some detective work. He actually has a bigger role in moving the story forward. Now let's talk about the Flash. What can we expect to see from him? So his girlfriend, Iris West, I mean, unclear if they're dating or anything at the time, but He's going to see her and he's going to break through some glass and save her from some falling car or something. Who knows? But there's going to be a cool action sequence of him and Iris West in the scene. Also, in the battle at Heroes Park, which is by the Superman statue right after he resurrects, the Flash is going to have a much bigger role at actually being in that fight. It was pretty funny the way they handled it originally, where Superman like falls on him and he tries to push him off because Superman's fast, the Flash is still faster, but Superman can more or less keep up with him if the Flash is not paying attention, which is why it's still so dangerous for him. But anyway, he's apparently supposed to like kick to him. That'll probably be part of the comedy. He's going to try to kick Superman. It's just funny seeing the Flash. He's still pretty new in this movie, so he doesn't have a great understanding of his powers. And then when they're battling underneath Gotham Harbor, Steppenwolf's going to do something. He's going to like destroy infrastructure, and there's going to be Star Labs employees in danger because, he captured them. This is where Silas Stone is. This is why the Justice League is there. The building's going to start to collapse, and the Flash is going to have to take everybody out. He's going to have to try to save everybody. And then somehow he's going to miss the last piece, and Cyborg's going to come in and like shoot it out of the way and make his like grand entrance. So that's another action scene Barry's going to have. And so that nightmare sequence again from Batman v Superman, where Barry like comes through the timeline and warns Bruce about like, you were right about Lois or Superman or whatever. Yeah, save Lois. They're going to talk. This is all possible by the cosmic treadmill, which is in future Justice League plans. Those will take a while to explain. But basically, Zack Snyder had a whole trilogy of Justice League movie plans. With the gist of it, this movie happens more or less like it did. The second one is about them taking the fight to Darkseid and Apocalypse, brutally losing. He takes control of Superman, kills a couple of the Leaguers, and then the nightmare sequence that Cyborg's been seeing that we saw in Batman v Superman comes to pass. And then the third movie, they go back in time and they fix it, very similar to the recent Justice League Dark Apocalypse War animated movie they released. If you have seen that, that was in vein of Snyder's vision for a Justice League trilogy. But anyway, Barry in this movie, they're gonna explain his going back in time. They're gonna explain the cosmic treadmill, how that's all possible. Lois Lane's gonna have an expanded role. What they're going to try to do in this cut is at the beginning of the movie, instead of that montage of like someone kicking over a crate of apples because, that says the world's a crappier place than it already is, Lois is going to be seen taking coffee to a guard at the Superman Memorial, like continually, and they're going to kind of talk about how the world's without hope as opposed to having that montage. Lois is going to be more the key of like, why is the world hopeless right now? Why does the world suck without Superman? And there's a couple more Lois scenes about her being a reporter, about her being contacted by Alfred. So there's a slightly expanded role for Amy Adams' Lois Lane, if you're excited for that. Superman's going to have a pretty big overhaul because, like I said, Joss Whedon pretty much completely reshot Superman's character in the movie because he didn't like what Zack Snyder was doing with him. Kind of like the complaints of Man of Steel. Superman's supposed to be a very hopeful, very happy, lighthearted character, but Zack Snyder made him pretty dark and serious in Man of Steel. And then in this movie, that he was kind of continuing that tone. The idea was, by the end of this Justice League trilogy, the Justice League would have been through hell and back, and they come out and Superman's hopeful, the universe is looking up, everything's looking happy. Now, that probably will never happen unless we get another 2 Justice League movies, and the universe is already kind of looking more hopeful with Aquaman and Wonder Woman and Shazam. Those are more lighthearted movies. But anyway, this is going to focus on a more grim story of Superman once again, which might upset people, but it fits the tone of the film. There's some knowledge about the growth codex from Man of Steel that's encoded in Superman that's going to prevent him from turning into Doomsday because they're afraid when they resurrect him with the Lex Luthor's ship that he used to create Doomsday that Superman might turn into Doomsday. They clarify that, some plot clarification. When Superman resurrects and he's in Heroes Park by a statue and inevitably fights the Justice League, there will also be military there shooting at him. He's going to be very confused. Probably won't say a word. And then we'll see that infamous black suit scene that's actually been released where he'll come back with his black suit, full Death of Superman style. Now changes that we know of to Aquaman. There will be an extended battle in Atlantis when Steppenwolf goes to take the mother box from there. I remember in the theatrical version, he comes in, he and Aquaman trade a couple blows, he grabs the mother box and leaves, and I'm like, wow, that was just pathetic. Like, literally, we just saw, granted, at this time we hadn't seen the Aquaman movie, but now we've seen the Aquaman movie. We know how advanced Atlantis is. We know how powerful their armies are. And you're telling me Steppenwolf walks in and takes the box within a matter of 2 minutes. It was pathetic. So there'll be an extended scene there with Aquaman and Mera fighting Steppenwolf, as well as parademons fighting the Atlantean army, and you'll get a grander scope of what that battle was like. Also, Volko's supposed to make an appearance. There's supposed to be a little bit more dialogue that sets up the Aquaman movie. Granted, we've already seen that, so that's not too important now. But at this point, Aquaman is not king of Atlantis. He's just Arthur Curry, who can talk to fish. There will be greater detail of the Unity scene, that final battle. You're going to see a lot of the other characters, Lois Lane, Martha Kent, Silas Stone, London, Gotham, Iceland Village, all these parts of the world, kind of like seeing the events of the final battle to give it a better scope of like, oh, the world actually knows about this. That weird Russian family that Barry was saving that were scared of parademons, don't know what purpose they served. That's probably not going to be in there. That was completely Joss Whedon. So a huge thing, actually, that was left out. So Steppenwolf does this thing where he brings his blade down and like creates this huge symbol in the dirt and like attack, power everywhere, right? So that actually is supposedly a partial anti-life equation, which turns people into parademons. Darkseid's whole thing throughout DC Comics is find the anti-life equation, which eliminates free will in all the universe. So he has bits and pieces of it usually, but he can't fully get it, which is where he would totally eliminate free will and can just have complete conquerings of the entire galaxy. So anyway, Steppenwolf's power supposedly has some of this effect, and he can infect individual areas with his blade itself. So in the battle on Themyscira, when the Amazons are protecting their box and Steppenwolf comes to take it, there's actually going to be a scene of him doing that and a couple of like Amazons getting infected, like we saw in the Comic-Con trailer, and she's actually going to kill herself before she becomes a parademon. Now that's a really cool concept, because that's something I always loved about these movies and these comics was Darkseid conquering worlds and then turning their people into parademon slaves that they can never really recover from. That adds like a very, very real stakes to it, makes it very scary, and the fact that we see that early on is gonna make me fear more for the characters. I never really felt the characters were in danger when I watched the theatrical cut. I'm sure we'll see much more changes than the ones listed here. This is just what's known right now as being in Zack Snyder's original vision. Who's to say that all that's going to come out for sure? When the Snyder Cut is released, sometime next year, 2021, I'm hoping earlier rather than later. But seeing as they didn't really start production till recently, we're not really sure how recently, we know they kind of got the green light at the end of February of 2020. But it's still in there as to how far they've gotten, how much they've done, how much COVID slowed it down. But I think it's realistic to expect summer 2021. So that puts us a year out, which is disappointing that it's a year. But hey, it's better than never getting it like we were kind of always kind of thinking in the back of our mind this entire time. So what does this mean for the DC Extended Universe moving forward? Well, it's really hard to say. There's hopes by some people that this will change the status quo. Maybe that'll pave the way, if it's really successful, for Zack Snyder to come back and make more Justice League movies, complete his trilogy, and adjust the plans from there. It's all up in the air. No one can know for sure. I very much believe it's not going to be more than a one-off, unless it is just this crazy, crazy, crazy successful movie, which I don't even think it's possible based on the way it's being released to a streaming service you have to subscribe for individually. But, we could hope that it comes up with more. Most likely, it'll not change much of anything, except possibly it could affect the Man of Steel sequel that is in the works. Recently, they decided to snub their Supergirl movie in favor of another Man of Steel movie. Now, based on how they affect Superman in here could affect the Man of Steel sequel, I think it's probably unlikely because they put him in a pretty good spot in the theatrical cut where he's back, he's happy, he's regular, and then you could easily segue into a new Superman movie from there. And like I said before, it'd be very difficult to somehow reconfigure continuity now that we have these other movies in production and you're just kind of haphazardly doing this. If I had to bet, there's almost no way this affects continuity. But at least we got the Snyder Cut. But anyway, that's all the news as we have it right now on the Snyder Cut. I'm sure more details will be coming out in the coming weeks, coming months, as this project ramps up, really hits stride, and as COVID dies down. And that's all I have for today. Thanks so much for tuning into the Classic Podcast. Be sure to check out Writer's Block, Brotel Brands, Shattered Universe coming soon. We have a lot of good stuff in the works. Really excited for you guys to check those out. Make sure to check out our website, brotelbrands.com. Get in contact with us. Let us know if there's movies you want us to review, if there's news you're interested in, anything like that. We want to hear from you guys. We want to have that. And when you're on our website, please make sure to subscribe to updates for all of our projects moving forward. Thank you guys so much for listening, and this has been the Classic Podcast.